Well, folks, we made it to season 7. Welcome to the Vulnerability Time podcast. I am your host, Josias Abriel, and published author. Speaking of published author, before the episode starts, make sure to go check out my books. They're available on Amazon, and the link is in the episode description below. Go ahead, get you some healing. One's a poetry book about overcoming pain and trauma and stuff like that, and then the other one's a self-awareness interactive journal notebook. So get you some healing. You're worth it. Another thing that you're worth all the love in the world. You're worth all the healing in the world, and I'm glad that you're here with us today to heal together. You are loved, you are valuable. This is your sign. Alrighty, enjoy the episode. Bye, folks. Alrighty, everyone. We love a pre-recorded intro. Okay, so folks, I'm sure you can tell by the title what we'll be talking today: addiction and mental health, and more. But first, before we get into that, I welcome Trent to the show. Welcome to Vulnerability Time.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, it's great to have you, Trent. Now, if those who have been listening since season 1 or season 2, you will remember my old name was Trenton, but I went by Trent. So, just clarification, this is a completely different person. It's not me. I have a new name. Okay. So Trent, before we get into our topics, let us know a little bit about you, any credentials, any work that you do, any books that you have, things like that. Let us know about you.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. So, Trent Carter, I'm board certified nurse practitioner, board certified in addiction medicine. I'm the founder and CEO of Renew Health, located here in New Mexico. So, what we do is we treat substance abuse. We help folks that are struggling with addiction. We handle mental health as well. We went from one clinic to many clinics, and now we serve the entire state. I think it's been a month ago today, actually. About a month ago, I released the Recovery Tool Belt. So I'm now a published author as well. I hope we get into that some today. I'm very proud of it. I think it's a fantastic book. Again, in the same realm, right? With folks that are struggling with substance abuse, it's for loved ones as well. What else, man? I mean, also entrepreneur, business owner. I wear a lot of hats. Pretty active person.
And folks, you can check out Trent's work in the episode description below. So Trent, after the well, I'll get your links, and I'll put them in the episode description below so folks can check your work out. So tell us a little bit more about your book that
Yeah.
you just mentioned, um about like how it's for those, correct me if I'm wrong, for those suffering and for those who know someone who's suffering from addiction.
Absolutely.
Tell us
So
a little bit about it.
sure, happy to. The Recovery Tool Belt. Look, it's basically a practical guide, right, for someone that's in addiction, that's someone that's struggling with substance abuse. It's something that they can actually use day to day. It's well, it, I put in there in the book what I see work in practice. I put things that consistently would help someone over and over and over. If it didn't make it to the book. So everything in there is proven, right? And again, something that you can actually apply to your everyday life and hopefully make a change. It can change somebody's life. It can save somebody's life. I think it's really good.
Beautiful, beautiful. What so is that something that you've always wanted to, like, how about this? Did the book, um was that a goal that you had, or was that like something that you didn't have necessarily any plans to make the book? It just maybe happened because something inspired you and encouraged you. Where did that journey look like?
Yeah, exactly. That it wasn't something that was long in the making. Now,
Hmm.
for years, I've had interest in a book.
Hmm.
I did not really think it was going to be about this. I just knew, hey, I'd like to write a book, right? But what I wanted to do, really, the inspiration for the book was expand the reach. Currently, we're in New Mexico, and I thought, so many people outside of New Mexico need help, and so I wrote this book in a way that You don't have to be in New Mexico. You don't have to get help from me. You don't have to come to Renew Health. This book is going to work for anybody, anywhere. So it's very intentional on the way that I worded that I wrote that book and the approach that I used. And so that way I can help someone that's in anywhere, Idaho, New York. Shoot, you could be in another country. I mean, a couple weeks ago, I was talking to a girl that's in England. I was a guest on her podcast, and she was asking questions about the book. And she said, everything you're saying applies to us here in England, in the UK. I know. Literally, it doesn't matter where you're at. So that was my approach to the book. And yeah, the inspiration was to expand the reach because currently I'm only helping folks in the state of New Mexico.
Mhm. I think it's beautiful that you're helping and wanting to expand that help, So I'm gonna just jump right into it. Because addiction and mental health are two things that I'm very passionate about. Have my own, personal journeys with both of those words.
Uh-huh.
Um, so when we were in our pre-meeting and we were discussing, not discussing, but we were figuring out what topics to, discuss for the show. Trent, why addiction and why mental health?
For me, why did I decide to go into that type of treatment?
Yes. What's
Yeah.
your journey behind that?
So again, not something I intentionally sought out, actually. It's I myself have never struggled with substance abuse or addiction or
Mm,
even really mental health. I don't have anybody close to me, a loved one, close friend, family member. I first got exposure to helping this patient population for folks that are struggling with this while I was in school to become a nurse practitioner. And while the doctor I was working with at that time, he was primarily primary care, right? So he's
mm,
helping with your whatever diabetes and respiratory infection, and you break a bone and you go and see him to see what's wrong, whatever. So, but he had a handful of patients that struggled with opioid abuse that he was helping, and I loved them to see the change they could make and how
mm,
quickly they could turn around. Literally, I mean, their entire life would just turn around so drastically, and how appreciative they were. It was hard to not
mm,
feel good when doing that. And so moved forward a couple of years. That was in Texas, moved to New Mexico. I just saw the need here. Okay, there's a lot of folks struggling here. So start doing a little bit of research, looking into the available resources. Well, our addiction rates and substance abuse rates are among the highest in the nation, yet the help, the resources are among the lowest, right?
mm,
Something's wrong with that picture. I said, "Well, shoot, I can make a difference in that. I know how to do that, kind of. I've had a little bit of exposure. So I had a lot of learning to do, even after I started the first clinic at Renew Health, because I hadn't seen it all. It's not exactly what I went to school for. I just knew, hey, I can make a difference. I can impact these people's lives,
mm,
and I'm going to continue to get better at it as I grow and as I continue on. And so that's exactly what we did. It's been 4 years now.
I like what you said. Oh, thank you for sharing, by the way.
Sure.
So usually when I you know um have conversations about or hear folks talk about well, let me start like that. Usually when I have like conversations about addiction, I'm not talking to podcasts, I'm just saying just in general conversations, it's usually someone who either struggle with it or have someone who has or know someone um influential enough to make them, be aware of that reality and of the reality of addiction.
Hmm.
Um, Usually, when I hear folks speak about addiction who've never, wrestled with it or known someone with it, it's a very kind of black and white statement of like, oh, they should just stop, or, and then there's that stigma around it, right? Um, and you know, I'm not saying they all mean to intentionally invalidate, but it can come off invalidating, to the realities, the complexities, the structural aspects of it, the root aspects of it, all of that complex reality. Um, However, you mentioned that you never struggled with addiction. Um, Where did your and I think it's really cool that you still had a heart, because I'm not used to that. I'm not what I'm about to say, I'm not used to that. Usually how I grew up, when someone spoke about like addiction, it was very, very invalidating, and they themselves have not I mean, themselves have not wrestled with addiction at that time. However, you said you haven't, but you seem to have this care and this unique heart for those who are struggling with addiction. And we'll get into mental health in a minute, but I wanted to honor and recognize that. I think that that is really cool to not have struggled with that yet still care. Um, I think
I
that's really
appreciate you
cool.
saying that. I do think it's a unique perspective because
Mm,
while I haven't ever personally struggled, I think for someone that's sitting across from me that they themselves are struggling and they're looking for help, hoping for help, you know that you're talking to someone that truly cares. I do this because I want to. And it's not for a well, it's you're collecting a paycheck or something. I started this company. you
mhm,
know, I'm not working for somebody else that's telling me, "Hey, you need to go do this."
right.
I chose to do
Mm,
this and I've only gotten in deeper. If I dipped a toe in the water, man, I'm up to here now, right? I'm all the
mhm,
way in, and so I really do care for this patient population, these folks that are struggling.
mm.
I've seen the change hundreds of times, thousands of times, and it's incredible. And every time you see somebody make that turnaround and their life changes, it's really hard not to buy in even more and become more passionate
Mhm.
about it.
Where does that where do you think that you can where do you think that comes from? I can
Well,
clarify if you want me to.
I think that to do a job like this, you have to genuinely care for people, right? Their
Mhm.
well-being to begin with. I mean, so for nurse practitioner, you've got to be a nurse first, a registered nurse. And
Mhm.
so I did nursing for I don't know, I think like 8 years, give or take,
Yeah.
before I went back to school and became an NP. And I
Were
went into
you
that
past the point where you already took clinicals and A&P and all those
at which point?
in your nursing?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wait, so
So
you finished nursing and came back, or
yeah,
did
so
you
to become a
stop?
nurse
Oh,
practitioner, you first have to be a registered nurse.
gotcha,
And
gotcha.
some people, hey, they finish their bachelor's degree, they get their RN, registered nurse, and roll right into it and become a nurse practitioner pretty quickly after. I did not do that. Instead, I've worked, like I said, I think it was 8 years or something. So I had a fair amount of experience, by my standard, quite a bit of experience before I went back to school.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, become an RN, you're A and P and all the science classes and clinicals and everything. And then again, I was an active, I guess, practicing, working registered nurse, primarily in ICU. I went into trauma right off the bat, but then I did all kinds of nursing
Mhm.
before going back to school to become a nurse practitioner. And so, it was interesting. I would see some addiction patients there. This is actually in my book because it's kind of fascinating. But when I was working trauma, my role is to keep this patient alive, right?
Mhm.
They come in, let's say EMS brings them in, then they come into the emergency department, then they get shipped up to us. So they stabilize them right off the bat, and then we continue that. And so if someone was struggling, let's say with alcohol, they're by the definition alcoholic, we are not there to treat their detox or to get them off to make them stop drinking alcohol. We're there to keep them alive in whatever traumatic event they have going on within their body. And so we would literally give them beer while they're there. It would be prescribed and on the medication list. And so every 6 hours or something, I'd go in the fridge and pull out a Coors Light and hand it to that person, and they would drink beer while in the hospital,
Mhm.
which is kind of fascinating. And so I would see, hey, we're clearly keeping this person alive. Good on us,
Mhm.
but we're also not addressing this over here. So even as a young nurse, I could see that.
Yeah.
So I guess I've always had that in me.
Always said, gotcha, gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. So when have you, because I know for in the reason, okay, I'll start here. The reason why I asked that, I just think it's really unique and fascinating, um what you're doing, especially when you said you've never really experienced it, like on a like yourself, so because I know for me a lot of my passion came from oh, I experienced certain things, and that's what like awakened me. So I just think that that's really, really, really cool when I see someone, who hasn't experienced something still show so much care. That's amazing to me. And it's good to know that that's out there, because I mean, I come from a family where, you know, if they haven't gone through something, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Pretty much, and then of course there's a lot of like invalidation and a lot of stigma that they throw, and you know, I had to a part of my recovery journey, I had to unlearn a lot of what they taught me in order for me to, progress in my recovery.
Hmm.
So I thought that was so I just think that that's really cool on a personal level. Um So when it comes to like addiction, right? So are you aware of like how, because a lot of people aren't, I wasn't until, I like did some digging, but how, a lot of times, trauma or adverse childhood experiences can directly correlate into addiction.
Yeah, I see it all the time. I firmly believe that it can. I
Mhm.
have, I don't know, countless patients. I don't know how many off the top of my head, but several times it's been directly correlated to some kind of traumatic event that they've had or childhood trauma, unfortunately, so often leads to it. And, you know, growing up in a household where it's happening too, it's a generational thing where the first time, I mean, I've got one patient that told me, whenever he told me this, it's probably mid 30s. He said the first time he ever did heroin, he was 12 years old, and it's when his father injected him with heroin. And it was almost like a passing right into adulthood, into the family. And that was it.
Mhm.
His father injecting heroin was the first time he ever did it at the age of 12 years old.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm a firm believer that childhood trauma can lead to it.
Yes, 1000%. And that's what I'm doing, with my research. So for folks that don't know, I'm a PhD student, getting my PhD in sociology, and my research, well, in a short snippet, I promise you it's more complex, and I feel like there's no elevator pitch that can do it justice. I'll have to like spew out, but as respect for Trent's episode, I'm not gonna like take over. But my research, I call it the sociological reality behind the mugshot, and it's basically the um it really delves into the direct correlation from adverse childhood experiences to incarceration. So that direct correlation, and it's shocking that, more than half of current inmates, there's a direct correlation, to be more specifically 98%. Um, but don't get me all started on that. And the reason why I mention this is because I got to see how childhood trauma, um, affects the brain and the body, right? It affects the nervous system. It affects the brain. It manifests. See, trauma like manifests in multitude of ways. Some of those ways look like depression, suicide, incarceration, addiction, aggression, lack of impulse control. Even like the smallest things, like, oh, like, why do I twitch out of nowhere sometimes? Like, it can be the smallest things. The point of the matter is it manifests. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because it's more, how would I say it? It breaks my heart when I see, and this is just me personally, based off the research that I've done and my own personal biases, but I more so let research take over. Okay, so I'm saying this in both aspects. Is like it breaks my heart when I see um, society treat addiction as a crime. I hate that. I hate it. I'm like, there's so much more to the story. Maybe
Hmm.
this person doesn't need a hammer. Maybe they need help, and instead of just locking the person up, we're not locking down on the root causes, the root issues, and it could be a
Nailed it.
multitude of things. Right, exactly. And so,
Nailed it. I'm
yeah,
a firm believer in treatment over incarceration.
thank
Yes.
you.
I talked on this. I was in an interview for news in Albuquerque last week, and they were asking because I'm real big on, look, addiction, substance abuse is not a moral failure, right? It's a chronic disease, chronic condition.
Exactly.
And so I firmly think that, look, if we can shift that mindset, change that mindset of addiction can be a treatable medical condition and it's not a moral failure,
Exactly.
then that's when we're truly going to be able to help these folks, right? I mean, if we're seeing addiction as a moral failure, then we're just shaming them, and shame is just going to keep people stuck.
Right.
But if we can view it as a treatable condition, then we're opening the door to compassion,
Yeah.
support. So I really think we should change the question from, why can't you just stop? Why can't you just change? Into,
Mhm.
how can I help you? What do you need?
Yes.
And that's really when recovery is going to become possible.
I completely agree because here's another extremely beautiful yet unfortunate statistic, and I'll explain why. So, this statistic isn't necessarily strictly recovery, it's more so in general, but based off what you said, it echoes it, it echoes it, it parallels it in the aspect that, like, yes, like recovery treatment works. So when it comes to incarceration, um punishment, which is, this punitive, just locking the person up, folks, that is only a 15% um effective in deterring future crime. Treatment and rehabilitation. You want to know how effective it is in deterring future crime, folks? 85%. 85%. Over 15%? What? However, coming from also a sociological perspective, I see why the system is more punitive because unfortunately, incarceration and addiction are a billion-dollar industry for a lot of individuals in charge in our government.
Hmm.
And it's not, oh, this political party or that political party. No, no, no. It's a lot. And um, the corporations that own prisons, those six, seven top corporations, folks, they make so much money. And so they want it. They want, the incarceration, they want the addiction, they want the mental health struggles. They want that. But they know, and we know, as someone who's like doing research in this, a lot of us know that like treatment and rehabilitation are more effective, heavily more effective. 15% punishment is effective, 85% treatment and rehabilitation. So, and the reason why is because, treatment and rehabilitation, it gets to the root. It gets to the root. I look at a tree and I no longer ask, why are the branches growing? Why are the leaves growing? I ask, where is it starting at? What's the source? Oh, it's the roots. It's the roots. It's the soil as well, and then you can get more complicated. Oh, it's the weather, it's the environment, it's the sun, it's the rain. It's so many things. And so I'm using the tree, folks, as symbolic, as like Trent said, society has taught us when it comes to addiction to ask the wrong questions,
Yep.
to say the wrong statements. Um, so that is just something that I, wanted to share. And, coming from, I know in another more personable, aspect of the addiction reality, folks, I'm pretty sure you've may have heard of me talk about it. I'm not sure, there's plenty of episodes, but so for me, my addiction, and when I say it out loud, it's going to sound, oh, it's not that bad, but it got bad, folks. It got extremely bad, okay? And it just screwed with me mentally, messed me up mentally, um, triggered me into self-harming, I mean, well, I already self-harm, but the addiction, I remember I had stopped self-harming, and then with the addiction, I started back self-harming. Not anymore. This was a while ago. I think I'm 3, 4 years sober from self-harm.
Awesome.
Um,
Good job.
Thank you. But addiction, folks, so I'll just say where it started. So my childhood came from was just tons and tons of abuse. And I didn't know that abuse was reshaping my brain. And there are some areas of the brain, folks, that when you experience trauma as a child, the more you experience, the higher the likelihood for it just doesn't go well. The more trauma, the just it's just not good. But there's treatment and intervention. Healing is possible. But anyways, so my brain, there were certain areas of my brain that weren't developing properly because of the amount of trauma. So, for example, currently till this day, I mean, I'm on medicine and therapy's been great, and I've been on my healing journey since I was 15. However, um, still to this day, because of the amount of trauma, the gray matter in my brain, it's definitely heavily affected. The amygdala is heavily affected. And so I forget things very easily.
Mm.
I have to, like, right now, like, I have a planner, folks, because and it's because I've and it's not just for, oh, work and school. No, no, no. Like, sometimes it's just like, okay, remember to brush your teeth. Like, I forget. Like, I will forget. And I know why now, like, but at first I was just like, oh, it's something, I'm just born like this. But, like, it's like, no, the gray matter, it's affected in the brain. The brain was is affected. But anyways, folks, you should really look up, folks. Folks, you should look up the difference and go on Google Images. Type in an abused brain versus a normal brain, and you will see the complete difference. And so we don't see that though when we incarcerate someone. We don't see that though when we're pointing the finger and saying, "Oh, they should just stop the addiction." Oftentimes, it's just a complete reality that we're not seeing, folks. And no shame on anyone, no shame on anyone. It's just, it's a reality that we're not talking about, or able to see, you know um as much as we're able to see someone in handcuffs. But my addiction, it started from, so it was just a childhood full of trauma, you know um and sexual abuse, physical abuse, all that good stuff by men. And I just remember I used to think I was very ugly. I used to, and I was always told that as well. And so one day, um, I went on a webcam, and I was still a kid, right? I was still a kid, folks, to give you context. I'm 27 now, but back then, I think when this started, I was still definitely not of legal age. And so I started webcam, right? And there was these grown men, right? Of course, they were well of age, so I know now that that was a form that was, they weren't supposed to be doing that, and they know my age because I told my age. I didn't think anything of it. Um, I was like, yeah, I'm 13, or yeah, I'm 14. Um, and that kicked off the webcam addiction and the pornography addiction, because there were these guys and they were saying all these. I felt loved. Now I know that was not love, but I felt loved. And there's a point I'm going to get to, folks. I felt loved. um they were saying these beautiful things about me, and, like, it was better than hearing, oh, I'm ugly, I'm this, I'm that I was hearing at home. And then here comes these guys saying these things that they they were different than what I was being told, so I received it as a form of love, um because I just knew that it wasn't as bad as what I was being told at home, folks. And so that And so I kept doing that because I kept chasing that feeling of love. I was searching for the right thing, and it was in the wrong place, clearly. Um, but it helped me survive. It genuinely did. And I know that's very controversial to say, but at that moment, like at that time in my addiction journey when it was first beginning, it's kind of like it was really helping me survive. It was helping me get through the day. Um, and so the reason I mentioned that is not just to share a personal journey, and then, but anyways, folks, from there it got worse, of course. But but I learned looking back that my addiction was less about addiction and more about gaining sanity, some form of comfort. The addiction at that time was providing what my body felt as though it needed and needed. You know, it provided a sense of happiness, a feeling of happiness, a feeling of comfort, a feeling of love. All are things that I just was not in the environment to get, and it's always been like that though. And so when I had a taste of what, and of course it was like a kind of like a false taste, but it tasted differently than what I have been getting. What was being poured into the tree, it tasted differently. And so I had a taste of it and I grabbed onto it. And there the addiction was starting to form. But I recognized the root for mine was I was in an environment that was giving me nothing but fire and I was trying to put it out. So I learned that my addiction, mine, and I know many others, when I hear many others share their addiction story, I'm not saying it's this way for everyone, folks, but I'm saying it's a reality for many folks, that, oftentimes like the addiction, like, what does that root look like? It's like for me, that addiction was less about addiction and more about gaining sanity, more about gaining comfort, gaining something other than tragedy that I've been giving. Yeah, it's my story.
Man, I see that so often, right? Which
Mhm.
obviously I deal with more substance abuse than like the behavioral side.
Mhm.
Um, it's an escape. It's all those ways that you put it, plus potential escape or something to latch onto that does it. You're getting that. It comes down to the dopamine. You're getting a little bit of a dopamine rush, whereas you typically don't get that. And unfortunately, it sounds like these individuals are very manipulative and probably knew exactly what they were doing, but they built you up, and it felt good because either you had never had it, or you don't typically get it, or it'd been a really long time since you had it, so you latch on to it. Like it's human nature because you got that little dopamine spike. Hey, that makes me feel good. I want to do that more.
Mhm.
And so that's what happens. And then unfortunately, it oftentimes can get out of hand.
Yeah.
And no longer do we possess that control. So exactly what you just said, that process, that mindset, that mentality, the way that it happens, and it can kind of snowball into worse. It's exactly what I see on a daily basis.
Yeah, exactly. Because I hear it a lot with those that struggled with substance abuse. They talk about like what it gave them at first, what it gave them at first, and so yeah. Um, Something that I did want to mention. So have you seen? Because I recent. So I have two. I don't know how to pronounce it, but Narcans.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, Trent, I'm sure you can explain it better than I can.
Sure.
Can you tell the folks what Narcan is? I mean, I could explain it, folks, but I feel like Trent can do it way better than I can.
Yeah. So Narcan, which is the brand name of naloxone, essentially it's an opioid antagonist, right? Fancy word to say what? It's going to help someone that's overdosing on opioids. It's going to, in fact, cancel out that overdose and can save a life. Um, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into. I can explain how that happens, but in a nutshell, there you go. It's an opioid reversal agent. It will save a life for someone that's overdosing on opioids.
I do want to hear more about it, but I will say
Sure.
first, the reason why I had it, and so this will also lead into my other question that I wanted to ask. So the reason I have two is because for my master's, I was getting my master's in social work, and I've never heard the word fentanyl ever,
Mhm.
but and this was up north, folks. Just to give folks geographical context, I'm saying like fentanyl's everywhere, but I'm just saying like where I was up north, this was the first time I heard about it. I've never heard about it here in the South, and I'm from the South, love the South. I've never heard about the word fentanyl. I didn't even know that was a drug until what, 4 years ago when I was doing 3.5, 4 years ago. Yeah, 3.5. Um, and apparently it was not necessarily on campus, but it was all around campus. Like everyone was just getting addicted. Not on campus. Let me rephrase that. Not on campus, but
Yeah,
like
but in the communities around you.
surrounding communities. Yeah, there you go. And we would always hear about like someone died. And then I remember I went shadowing a police officer for one of my projects, and oh my god, I don't know why he showed us, oh my gosh, but he showed us like the photos of like dead victims. Oh my gosh, it was so it made me and I've never struggled with drug addiction necessarily. Um um I've never like even smoked weed, never done drugs, but I've always had a heart for those who've done drugs and even and or who struggle with drug addiction. Um, I don't know why. Maybe I had drug addiction in a past life. I'm not sure, but I've just always, even before like the webcamming, I just always like honored people who struggled with drug addiction. I just always thought that they were so strong and just so they're so humble, and I don't know, I just gravitate. But anyways, I've never heard the word fentanyl, right? And I started doing research on it just a little bit, and I stopped doing research because it started getting triggered, and I started being, yeah, I was like, okay, like how can I help? What's something we as a society could do? Like I started getting triggered, and then I started getting in that mindset where it's just like I want change to happen right now. I want everyone to be, society to be so loving and graceful to each other, to and lend a helping hand to our neighbor that's struggling with fentanyl. But I was like, that's not realistic to happen right this second. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's happening, but to say that I want every single human in society right now to be that love, but that's it. So I got in my head, right? Um, and so I didn't buy it. I actually got it for free. Um, they were gonna charge, but then I ended up getting it for free. So I got two Narcan little pump thingies that you put in someone's nose, I believe. And so that's how I heard about it, was because of like fentanyl, and that's scary, like how it just takes a little bit to kill
Mhm.
someone. That was really scary to just know and to see those photos. I was like, oh my gosh. Because I mean, he also showed us other photos like of car accidents and stuff. Like that was horrible. But the fentanyl, like I never heard of Narcan until the fentanyl, and so it just deepened my my understanding
Mhm.
and awareness, Trent.
Yeah, it's prevalent, man. It's everywhere. So, interesting enough, before this fentanyl problem was mainstream and we're seeing it everywhere and all these overdoses, we can go back to me being a young nurse. It's a very effective painkiller. I mean, that's what it is. And I used it on a daily basis. Again, I'm working in trauma ICU.
Right.
So these people have massive injuries and they're under medical supervision. They're most trying to think if I ever had a patient that wasn't, but it was intubated and sedated, right? No, yeah, intubated and sedated. So they're not feeling it. They're literally knocked out, but they're on a breathing machine. And then they're hooked up to all these monitors. We're monitoring the vitals and everything else. And those are the people I would give fentanyl to. So try to picture that, right? You've got monitors everywhere and all the chaos going on. And those are the type of folks that would get fentanyl under appropriate supervision. But now you got people that are doing it on sidewalks or in basements or in, it's like, look who's helping you. It's someone that's done it a lot themselves, but they're no medical expert, and you're certainly not hooked up to a monitor and under appropriate supervision. And then we wonder why we've got these overdose rates that are happening.
Mhm.
So yeah, just kind of an interesting thing there. But yeah, it's unfortunately prevalent. I think everybody at this point, for the most part, has heard about it, seen it. It's on the news.
Yeah.
There's no areas that are not touched. It touches
Right.
all of America. Yeah.
Yeah. And something that stuck with me that the cop said, he said, he gave an estimate. He said that um, of course, he's a cop, so of course he sees, a dead bodies, in multiple ways, whether it's a car accident, homicide, to all it. He said 90% in his town, 90% of deaths that he sees are fentanyl overdoses.
Hmm. Wow.
90%.
Wonder if he was that a small town?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, small
Well,
town. That's unfortunate. Hit really hard. How long ago was that? You said it was a few years ago?
3, 4 years ago, whenever 2022 was, I don't know the
I
year
wonder what
anymore.
the rates are now, just out of curiosity. But yeah, there you go. I mean, that can tell you how hard some of these towns were hit, and some of these small towns, especially where they likely lack the resources and infrastructure and training and education to handle this. So
Mhm.
when it just hits you like a sledgehammer, you see massive amounts of overdoses right off the bat before everybody can catch up on, hey, what is this? What's going on? How do we treat it? What's the right?
Yeah.
And you can lose a lot of lives before that happens.
Right. Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit can you tell us a little bit about like Narcan, like how that saves lives? Because I don't know. I just know how to use it. I don't know anything
Gotcha.
else about it.
Yeah. It all comes down to the receptors we have in our brain. So any medication we take, anything, all acts on these receptors. And if it can't get into the receptor, we literally just excrete it. So we pee it out or, have about whatever, and it gets wasted. It doesn't work. And so same thing for fentanyl or opioids. It's called the mu receptor. Again, irrelevant for the conversation, but when an opioid, and in this case we're talking fentanyl, goes into that receptor in our brain, and it's in our gut, they're all over our body. But that's how it works. And so whether we're talking the pain relief or the euphoric high or whatever it is that they get from it, it's because it goes in that receptor. So if Narcan is covering that receptor and nothing can go into it, you're not going to get that rush or that high, right? And so, what is an opioid overdose? Well, basically, it kills your drive to breathe,
Mm.
to take a breath, right? To take for the respiratory action, to have your diaphragm expand and so your lungs can open and you take a breath. And so, an overdose from opioids literally is where you just take fewer and fewer and fewer breaths. If you're normally taking 16 breaths per minute, and then it goes down to 12 to 9 to 7 to 6 to 2, and then you just stop breathing. That is how the overdose happens. So that's why I mentioned being intubated and on a ventilator earlier when we were giving it in the ICU, because that ventilator is taking that breath for that person. You can't have an overdose because they're still having these breaths, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So that's how it works on the receptor. So why Narcan? So I'm going to use an analogy here of a magnet. Let's think about a magnetic pull, a magnetic attraction. Okay. Essentially, Narcan has a higher magnetic pull. It's called affinity, a higher affinity to that receptor than what the fentanyl does. So someone takes fentanyl, it goes in the receptor, right, and starts doing its thing. This individual has had too much fentanyl because they don't have a tolerance built up or whatever the case may be. So they start having an overdose, an opioid overdose. So their smart buddy is next to him and he had some Narcan. And so he puts Narcan in their nose, let's say, to counteract that. That Narcan has a stronger magnetic pull, a stronger affinity to that receptor. So literally, you take the Narcan, it goes to the receptor and it kicks the fentanyl out of the receptor. Well, now the fentanyl is just floating around. It's still in their body and in their system, but it's not on the receptor. So it's not doing anything. And that's how you counteract the overdose. Now, I will say, to take this a step further and make it a little more complicated, now I'll mention half life. Half life is essentially how long is it in our system? How long does it work for? Fentanyl has a longer half life than Narcan, which means fentanyl can stay in our system, in our body, longer than Narcan. Why does this matter? Because you may Narcan somebody, the fentanyl's in the receptor, Narcan comes in, knocks it out, you just saved them, right? Well, then that Narcan wears out in, let's say, 30 minutes. What happens to the fentanyl? It goes right back to the receptor. They just overdosed again, even though they haven't done any fentanyl since then. So now you've got to Narcan them again. So this can be really important because sometimes, I mean, I've heard of cases of somebody being Narcan 4 times before they were able to get emergency services there to then intubate, to sedate them and put them on a breathing machine. So yeah, interesting. I'm trying to not go into too much crazy detail there, but that's essentially how it works.
No, you're fine. Because I was wondering why they told me, and I mean, I would do this anyway. But I was wondering why they really emphasized when they said, because it was my professor that um, kind of like told me about it, and there was also someone who sisters worked at the hospital, and they were there was Narcan there that we all went and got. I was wondering why they told me that once you Narcan someone, call the ambulance.
That's why.
Right. So that's why. I mean, that's something I would do anyway, because seeing someone overdose would freak me out.
Right. There's
Anyways.
really multiple reasons you should call because,
Mm,
if they've been out for a couple of minutes and they're not breathing, or at least they're only, they're not having the appropriate amount of oxygen, you worry about their oxygen levels getting low. So even if they're taking 2 breaths per minute, yeah, they're still alive, but they're not having enough oxygen. And so now we got oxygen depletion going to the brain. So you worry about brain damage, right? There's all kinds of things that could happen. So yeah, even if you Narcan someone right away, you should still call emergency services. And so many areas and so many states, I'm drawing a blank on what it's called, but essentially you're protected, meaning they can't come show up and now arrest you for doing fentanyl. You're protected because you just saved this person's life. So there's not a problem with legal trouble or something like that. Um, yes, you should always call after Narcaning someone. And then again, for the explanation that we just said, if you Narcan them and you think they're good and then you leave them because you don't want to get in trouble, there is a chance that they will, in fact, overdose again in 20, 30 minutes, however long that half life is, even though you Narcan them, because that fentanyl is going to hang around longer than the Narcan will in their body.
yeah. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you for that, Trent, letting us know. Um, okay, so I have a question, and this is a little off topic, but before we transition into our the next topic, mental health. Well, two things. When we did a pre-meeting, I have on my notes that you're fine if this goes over an hour, correct?
Yeah, we're
Okay,
good.
gotcha, good. Because what I'm gonna do is I'm going to make this a two-parter. Why? Because I really want folks to digest this episode and kind of like about like addiction, because you taught me so much. And so I really want folks to, digest it. I don't want folks to be
I'll dive into
overwhelmed.
it, man. This is what I do. I, I love it. I'm happy to dive into it. So, I mean, there's a chance you could ask something that may stump me, but hey, addiction treatment, trying to make a change and help
Yeah.
folks, and I'm happy to help. And especially, I think, again, I don't know if you want to clip this conversation we're having right now on the podcast, but I think that knowing how the Narcan works is important. I think that understanding how some of these medications work are so important. In fact, I would love to touch on, if you don't mind asking the question, um, you're just swapping one drug for another. I love talking on that because I get
Mm,
that all the time. Oh, well, you're just trading one drug for another. So I've got a whole spiel I can give on that I think is really important. And it kind of comes under what we already talked about with bringing the awareness, talking about the stigma, trying to destigmatize.
mhm.
And maybe we could touch a couple of your listeners and they'll have a better understanding.
So share about it. Share about it, Trent. You said the swapping one drug out for another.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before in regards to
Oh,
like
yeah.
Narcan. Tell us about it.
Well, not for Narcan, not for Narcan. So
Oh.
Narcan, because that's, let's call it a one and done, right? You just
Mhm.
use it to stop the overdose, to
Mm.
reverse that overdose. But if you've got someone that then, let's say they're using fentanyl and they overdose, whether it's the first time or literally the 15th time, the 20th time, and they finally said, "Hey, I don't want to do that anymore. This is scary. I'm as close to dying as I basically could get. I essentially died or almost died, and then they brought me back." Um, well, I guess technically they wouldn't have died, but they're really, really close to it. So, hey, let's get treatment. I want to get treatment. And so someone looks into treatment and they're like, so therapy and all that's fantastic. Yes, I want to do that. But maybe it's not enough for me. Maybe I need more. Well, there's medication assisted treatment, fancy way of saying the medication to help you out. And so Suboxone is my bread and butter. I love the medication Suboxone. Now, there's also methadone. I'm sure we've heard about methadone, and it's also effective. Unfortunately, there's a lot of downfalls to methadone. I myself don't prescribe methadone. Renew Health, we don't do methadone. We do every other medication for substance abuse except for methadone. So I'm going to focus on Suboxone. And so I've had so many people, I mean, literally argument with, right off the top of my head, there's an ER doctor that I can remember I got in a pretty big argument with, or even just patients, potential patients, family members questioning about it. And they said, well, aren't you just trading one drug for another? No, you're not. And here's why. So we already touched on viewing addiction and substance abuse as a medical disease, right? A chronic medical condition. Okay. So for the medical community, pretty widely that terminology is accepted. Chronic medical condition is how we view addiction. Well, what are some other chronic medical conditions? Okay. High blood pressure, diabetes, glaucoma, right? The list goes, high cholesterol, the list goes on and on and on. And how do we treat those? Well, first off, it should start with lifestyle changes. Okay. So maybe you need to change your diet. Maybe you need to get a little more exercise. Maybe you need to stop whatever you're doing. Hey, okay, so you have a couple of drinks every single day. You should probably cut that out because that's going to lead to high blood pressure and weight gain and all these things. So first and foremost, you should change these things. If that's not successful, or if it's already severe, you're beyond a certain point, we're still going to suggest those changes. But now we're going to give you a medication, right? That's going to lower your blood pressure. It's going to more manageably affect manageably. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank. It's going to better manage your diabetes. There we go. Sorry, I got a little tongue twisted there. Or hey, we're going to give you some statins to lower your cholesterol. You see where I'm going with this, right? Yet, whenever we talk about addiction and substance abuse, somehow that's not the same thing because I
Mm.
give you a medication.
Mm.
Why? Well, it's because the stigma that's associated with it. And so I'm going to give someone that abuses fentanyl, that's overdosing, that maybe they're not holding a job, they don't even have a job, or whatever it may be. They're not prevalent in their children's lives because their children have been taken away from them because of all the drug activity that goes into it, all these things. But I'm going to give them a daily medication, or hey, even better, there's a once a month injection, literally one shot lasts for 4 weeks, 28 days, and it's going to completely turn their life around. So all the drug seeking behavior has gone away,
Mm.
all the potential criminal activity to get the money to then purchase the drug has gone away. They're able to, in fact, maintain a job. They're not having to call emergency services or go to the emergency room nearly as often because they're not overdosing, right? So it's taken stress off of our current, resources within the medical field and everything
Right.
else.
That's
So we have
important.
all these very, very, very positive things, yet we want to say that you're just trading one drug for another.
Mm.
How could you possibly say that?
Mm.
How? Please make that argument make sense to me, because you can't.
Mm.
And then to take it even a step further, when we look at medications, we look at all cause mortality and morbidity. Basically, is it going to kill you? Is it going to harm you? Right? What's the effectiveness of it? Every medication, aspirin, we look at any medication, we look at all cause mortality and morbidity. Suboxone has one of the highest success rates. I mean, if someone is, now, of course, they could fall out of treatment or whatnot, but for someone that's going to be in treatment and truly follow through treatment, the success rate is astronomical. You can put it up to, I don't know of any medication that's better. There potentially is a medication that's better, but Very, very few. It's going to be in the top 5% or 1%
Mhm.
of effectiveness for all medications. So we've got this safe and effective medication that totally changes someone's lives. Yet we're going to shame them that they're just trading one drug for the other. It simply doesn't make sense.
Right. Wow. I never even knew that that was, um, that people said that. I was not
Yeah,
aware. Tell you
it's very
something.
common. It's very
Wow.
common. Even so, I mean, you look at like AA and NA, and I'll talk on AA specifically. Look, it's been around for a long time, and it's saved millions of
Mm,
lives. And I am not going to discredit that by any means, but my many of my patients aren't technically eligible because they're on medication. So now they can't attend these, NA and AA and things like that, which I think is look, it's outdated. These medications and this type of treatment was not available when AA started.
mm,
So while I think it's fantastic, I think that maybe it's time to look at and maybe revise a couple of things because mean, my patients aren't getting high. They're not doing it to have fun or to get a rush or to party or to whatever. They're doing it to maintain brain chemistry and
mhm.
continue to feel good and be a productive individual. So again, I think that that's something else that we should look at and potentially revisit and maybe make a couple of changes.
Yeah. Gotcha, gotcha. Two things. One, I loved how you broke it down. You really made it very understandable. I
Thank you.
appreciate that, Trent. So I think the changes are slowly starting to happen. Because I've been going to NA for years.
Awesome.
Um, Not necessarily because I like struggle with substance abuse, but it's like especially at that time, I was struggling with addiction, and NA is like the only place I felt home. I've always, even since I was a kid, I've always felt home around someone who's struggled with drug addiction, currently struggled with drug addiction. Like I just, or know someone who has. Like I've just always felt home. Um, and um, I noticed, and recently actually, a couple times,
I was going to ask the question if this is recent.
yeah, huh?
I was going to ask if this was recent.
Yeah.
You know,
Recently, so there were a couple people, they were saying how, um, forgot what it was, but pretty much, they had stated, that they're having to take a medication,
mhm,
and everyone was very supportive
that's awesome.
still, and they're just like, just make sure you talk to your sponsor
Yeah.
as well. I guess to maybe help that accountability, um, so that maybe it doesn't, turn into an addiction. And then also something that I also noticed, speaking of like, taking medication and then the NA thingy, or just any anonymous meeting, like AA and NA. So I learned something that I wanted to ask you if you know the name of it. So I learned that, um, we can ask for non-addictive pain medicine,
Mhm.
but they were saying how, and my professor taught me this as well. But they were saying how, you know, you got to ask for it. They're not, because oftentimes they're going to give you like the one that's like addictive.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, opioid pain medication,
Mhm,
opioid-based pain medication. So, like your hydrocodone or your Percocets or your Oxy or something like
mhm,
that. Those are the ones that can potentially be addictive. Now, it's important to say, look, these medications are very effective for what they would be prescribed for,
mhm,
pain management,
mhm,
right? It's just the nature of an opioid is if you take too much for too long, you're going to build a tolerance. Okay. That is your body's defense mechanism, is in fact what a tolerance is. Same for alcohol, right?
Mhm.
It's your body's defense against what the alcohol does to you. And so it builds a tolerance. Then what do? You drink more, and it builds a tolerance. And so it's going to work the same way here for the opioids. And so if someone's still in pain, what you see happen is maybe their dose will go up, or maybe the frequency. Hey, we're going to keep the dose the same. We're going to keep it at fives or whatever, but instead of 2 a day, we're going to do 3 a day. Same thing. You're increasing that daily dose within 24 hours. Then they build a tolerance. You get a little more, and then you form that physical dependence. That is, in fact, in this scenario that we're talking about, someone may not be drug seeking. They may not be abusing it. They are taking it as prescribed because they have pain,
Right.
whether it's acute pain from a surgery or chronic pain from an injury that happened 30 years ago, whatever, they're in pain. Well, if you continue to take this, right, and the tolerance builds, you can see what happens. You just go up on the dose. So I think what you're talking about is more acute pain, potentially from like a surgery, or even if, hey, whatever, I fell off the stairs and I bumped my knee or broke my wrist or something like that, and I'm in pain. So you would get a medication that is not an opioid.
Mhm.
Therefore, it's not addictive. Why is it not addictive? Because of the physical dependence. You're not building that physical dependence. You're not building this tolerance and have to
Mhm.
go up on the dose and become physically dependent upon it. So, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, it clarifies. And
Cool.
and some of my ignorance behind it. By ignorance, I don't mean that in a shameful way, folks. I mean
No, no.
just
You just
not
lack of
knowing.
knowledge. You mean it's right. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, wow. So, wow.
But there's so many things on top of it too.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I have a lot of patients that have pain. And so I've
Mhm.
got providers, medical doctors, whatever, that are pain specialists, but they're non opioid prescribing pain
Mm.
specialists. So they'll do things like they'll put in blocks, right, that numb it, or all these different techniques, injections, and all kinds of stuff to where we can try to get more holistic and natural pain relief that's not just take this hydrocodone, it's going to kill your pain. Yeah, it'll kill your pain for sure.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, if you don't address that root cause, notice what I did there, exactly like what you were talking about, right? If you're not addressing that root cause, hey, here's a 30-day prescription that should take care of your pain. Cool. When 30 days goes by, that pain's likely still going to be there. You're just not having something that's numbing it, that's killing that pain.
Right, right.
And it may be surgical intervention, or you need to go to some physical therapy or chiropractor, or start exercising and stretching, whatever it may be. But in the meantime, hey, we're going to put a block in there that's going to take care of some of this pain. And I'm not prescribing you an opioid that potentially could cause a physical dependence that could lead to this nasty rabbit hole and this downward cycle.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, okay. Friend, I'm telling you, I just want to just sit and listen all day. I'm telling you. So there was also another thing that you had mentioned. See, I forget, but I remember. So fun fact. So when it comes to me forgetting things, like for example, I'm not the best at names. But I'll remember someone's face, but I'm not the best at names. Or
Guilty.
right. Or if like someone told me something super like important or something that I found of interest, I will forget. But so I learned to depend on how I feel. So if I felt like something was important, that's why I'm just like, oh, hey, there was something. Maybe you remember it, but I remember you said something because I had a reaction internally um, that made me feel like, oh, wow, this is something that I want to know of. So, like, for example, like someone could tell me something so motivating and I can forget, but I remember how I felt.
Yeah.
So, Trent, I remember I felt um, very interested when you had said, it was after, you said you wanted to speak on the statement of switching, like, oh, this drug, you're just switching it for another one. There was
Yeah.
something else
Trading
that
one
you
to one.
said. Was it destigmatizing
Could be. Yeah.
addiction? Yeah, because I remember I
I'm
just
pretty
was
big
like
on that.
curious
Yeah.
to hear more, and so I'm relying on that feeling.
Okay.
Do you remember
Yeah.
what it
So
was?
I do think that, well, it's what it is. It's, hey, I'll use the word you used, ignorance, right? I like,
Mhm.
maybe, again, not to be derogatory or hateful or shameful or mean, but like, look, I'll be honest. If there's a topic anything. Let's back off of what we're talking about right now. Anything. If you're someone that just doesn't know because it's not what you deal with, you're just not educated in that, you don't live that daily, yet you form this really strong opinion on that without due diligence of learning more or having firsthand experience or secondhand experience or just right. Like, why do you have such a strong opinion on it? You don't know anything about it, but yet you're going to argue about it, right? Even though you really don't know. And then I can't wait until you face somebody that knows a little bit more about it than you, and then they shoot you down, right? Every now and then we get lucky and we form that really strong, uneducated opinion, and it happens to be right, but so often it's not. And so, with what I was saying earlier, yeah, I got into a really strong, heated argument in the hospital with an ED emergency department doctor. He works in the ER. He's the guy you see when you come in. Smart guy, does a good job at ER stuff. Terrible with substance abuse patients. He didn't like them, right? They were annoying to him. It's like, hey, get out of here. And he had formulated this opinion that you're just trading one drug for the other. I'm like, let's talk about that, man, because you're wrong. And I
Right.
can't wait to tell you. And so I believe so much that comes from the stigma, right? The stigma that comes along with addiction. And whether we're talking the behavioral side of addiction, the substance abuse side of addiction, it's if it's taboo, if it's just not someone that, hey, I just don't agree with that. And so I'm going to push that person out. I think that we have to have an understanding. We need to destigmatize if we want to make a change. And we need to accept, hey, this is a real thing, right? We need to normalize it, not that that's the way it should be, but normalize it in the sense of this is very prevalent. We're having, which last year our overdose rates went down, but the year prior it was like 113,000 or something overdose deaths, and then last year it went down. But regardless, if we're around 100,000 overdose deaths, sorry, challenging for me to say, yearly, these are avoidable deaths that shouldn't happen. It doesn't need to happen. So shouldn't we try to figure out how to make a change on that? And if all we're going to do is throw them in jail, right? If we're going to use the penal system, like, well, that's just going to be a revolving door
Yeah.
because once they get out, did we try to implement something for them? Are they going to be right back? Or are they in fact going to get deeper into that cycle while they're incarcerated? I've had a lot of patients that come to me like, man, I never did heroin until I was incarcerated.
Exactly.
Gosh, I went in
Exactly.
not being a drug abuser and I come out a drug abuser and I've got this problem. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so if we can accept it, try to break through these barriers that are a stigma, and then I think that is really when we can see change on a massive scale. If we can change the landscape of how, again, that shift in mindset, the way that we view this, the way that we talk about it, the way that we address it, the way that we
Yeah.
approach it, if we can change that, that's truly when we're going to see a massive shift in overdose deaths. Overdose deaths. Man, I'm struggling with saying
I
that.
mean, try saying that 12 times super fast.
Yeah,
Overdose it like,
overdose deaths.
yeah.
But even people that aren't overdosing, that's just the extreme end. I mean, let's not even talk about that. What about the folks that are just struggling? They
Yeah.
just feel like crap every single day,
Mm,
and they're losing their children because they're being taken away from them. They can't hold a job, or they're sucking the resources that are available. Like we talked about going to the ER earlier. That's, hey, you've got somebody that's in a car wreck over here, or somebody that's whatever, but and now we've got people that are coming in because they're overdosing or they're close to it. They're withdrawing. Hey, I'm not overdosing, but I feel like crap because I'm withdrawing. That's putting stress on the system, and sure would be nice to cut down on those rates.
right, exactly. I agree. And something really cool that you said that I forgot to mention, but you touched on it, so just the importance of treatment and rehabilitation. Because f- so you had mentioned that the revolving door of
Mhm.
incarceration, right? I like that. I'm gonna use that maybe in my research or
Go for it.
presentation. Thank you, Trent.
Point it, take it. You can have it.
Revolving door. Yeah. So yes, you are correct. So, folks, I'm not saying this is specifically with drug addiction or substance abuse. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this in general. within these are the statistics, folks. Okay, so recidivism rates. Recidivism means it's basically a revolving door. It's basically once someone is locked up, they get released, because their time is over, and then they come right back. So within 3 years, 68% of current inmates will be back behind bars once they're released. Within 6 years, 72%. Within 8 years, 83%. Folks, this is why treatment and intervention, and notice that the longer you're like it let me not go on that. But
Yeah,
treatment
the
and
longer you're
intervention.
out, the odds are stacked against you of going back. So shouldn't we make a change? Shouldn't
Exactly.
something change, right? Even if it's
Yeah.
like, hey, I don't know exactly what to do. Okay, well, let's start that conversation. When I say we, I mean I'm talking at a community level, all the way through a federal level, and
Mhm.
everywhere in between.
Yeah.
It's a problem, and
Yeah.
it's just putting stress on the system that potentially is unnecessary.
Right. Exactly. It doesn't have to be that way. Exactly.
Yep.
And that's also yeah, because I forgot what I was gonna say. But
Okay. So
what
I've
I
got something I can touch on with that you may like
yes,
or
please
find
do.
interesting. Um, so one of the big pushes right now that Renew Health, again, my company here in New Mexico that we're working on, we're trying to get in with these detention centers to offer again the type of treatment
Oh,
we do there.
yeah.
And so something fantastic that was recently implemented. I don't recall exactly when this went into law here in New Mexico, but really recent. Um, January 1st, 2026, all these detention centers are going to be legally required to offer this type of treatment to the folks that are staying there. Notice I put that nicely, the people that are staying there, right? Well, why are we just now doing that? I mean, kudos that we're finally going to implement this, but why are we just now doing that? And so, Renew Health, I mean, we're trying to be one of the big players that's going to help them
Mhm.
out because a lot of these detention centers, they don't actually employ them people there themselves. They contract all that to the experts like what we are. So I think it's great. And my thought is, hey, we've got them there for however long, if it's 30 days or 90 days or 12 months, however long they're going to be there. They've admitted that they're struggling or their drug test has shown otherwise, whether they told the truth or not. We know they're struggling, right? And of course, I'm just talking about the percentage of the people that are struggling, not everyone is there. So shouldn't we try to implement something? This seems like a heck of a time to do it, right? They're there and under your control. Not that you should always force someone against something that they don't want, but hell, make them force them to take classes. I don't care. Force them into therapy, right? That's pretty non-invasive,
Mhm.
or even better, potentially the type of treatment that we do with the medication and whatnot. And I think that the recidivism is going to go down
1000%.
because, yeah, now they're better educated. They've got more tools in their tool belt, which again, the recovery tool belt, that is the title of my book. That is very intentional. They've got more tools to work with and they're on treatment, right? Those receptors that we talked about are being filled with the medications that are prescribed under medical supervision that are the appropriate dose. They don't have cravings. So now they get released, reintegration into the community. And the first thing they're doing isn't, hey, man, I'm going to go get high because otherwise I'm just going to withdraw because I used yesterday anyway. No, we're not going to do that.
Right.
Now they're in the appropriate treatment, taking exactly what they need to be taken, FDA approved medications that come from the pharmacy, right? It's not getting abused. They're not getting high.
Right. Right.
And now the first thought is, man, I can't wait to see my wife, can't wait to see my kids. And then I'm gonna go get my butt a job because I gotta produce, I gotta take care of my family, right? And this whole drug seeking behavior is not even a thought when they get out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, those rates would never be 100%, but they're gonna be a heck of a lot better than they are right now.
1000% will be tons better than what they are now. And what you said reminded me of what I was going to say. I First off, thank you for sharing that because I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that because I get very very let's say passionate um knowing that more can be done. And so because I'm coming from a sociological perspective, folks, I have to learn the systems, and the systems don't want, um, let's just say they don't want there to be that much help out there because they don't make that much money. So to hear that there's groundbreaking things happening, Trent, that is beautiful. I needed to hear that. Folks, I don't want to I'm going I don't want to how about this? I want my summer to be a little bit longer because I start back school this semester, this month, and this is the month of August, and I just want one more month of rest because sociology, that shit's hard,
It's a lot.
especially
Yeah.
when you're extremely passionate, like seeing how the systems work and seeing how like, wow, I thought everything was just, started in the childhood and it was just like, oh yeah, like yes, there's the root, but there's also the sky. There's also the
Mhm.
weather. Who's controlling that? So that breaks my heart
There's
being
so many influencing
so
factors.
many influencing factors. So what I think is so beautiful, Trent, is that drug courts are now a thing,
Mhm.
and there's more and more drug courts being made, and folks that don't know drug courts, basically, let me say it in a in the simplest way I can. So basically, someone can get sent to drug court and that's where they'll find the treatment, the intervention, the healing, even individualized court docket programs for the individual. I'm not saying that happens all the time, but the fact that that is a reality that does occur. I remember I had a classmate when I was getting my master's in social work. She came to me and she said, because this is around the time when I first learned about drug courts and mental health courts. Well, I knew about mental health courts, but drug courts, and then what was new that I learned with mental health courts is someone going to drug court and mental health court, even better. But
Mhm.
she had mentioned that she walked into drug court and said, I need help. She well, at that time it was about like mm, what was it, 3 years? 3 years sober. But anyways, now I believe it would be around like 6 years sober. Um, Drug courts help, and she was just telling me how much they helped. You know, getting to and it all echoes, treatment and intervention. Like it's not too. I know some people may argue this, but it's not too late. I've had people argue with me about my research. Not basically if someone's on death row or something, or if someone's like extremely, extremely old, is it too late for treatment? I will, of course, argue no. I will just always argue no, it's never too late. They're like, but they're on death row. I was like, actually, did you know, statistically speaking, most people on death row die before death row, statistically speaking,
Yeah.
literally. So they're because death row gets extended over and over. But anyways, but the point of the matter is that it's never too late. So if someone's out there and they're feeling like it's too late, I promise you, it's not too late. Trent, what are any resources out there that you know of that I can put in the episode description below?
I'm so glad you just said that because that's exactly what I was going to touch on with your story. Well, one, the recovery tool belt. Look, if anybody listening is going to fall into everything that I've been blabbing about for however long now, you got to check it out. But you talking about drug court and going there and hey, I don't really know what to do, where to go, but I need help. Guys, there are resources everywhere. And that right
And
there is a great
free.
way to find it. Yeah. And that right there is a great way to find out. And that's just one example. There's so many resources. Hey, Google's a pretty good resource too. Now everybody's using Chat GPT is a pretty good resource too. So put in the prompt. Hey, I'm struggling with this. What's near me? What are my options? Run down that rabbit trail. So what are we doing? We're educating ourselves. All this stuff is tying back into what we've been blabbing about here, man. It's due diligence. It's educating yourself. It's acquiring new knowledge, learning more. But then you've got to implement that. Like that's a great first step. But if you don't act upon it, if you don't take that next step, you didn't really do much other than know what's out there, right? So then the next step is taking action. Um, yeah. So I talk a lot about that in my book, specifically how to find resources, how to acquire some of this newfound knowledge. Again, this book is not for someone well, it's for someone that's in New Mexico, but I intentionally wrote this for someone that's outside of New Mexico, that's anywhere. How do you go about that? What are potential resources that are online, phone numbers you can call,
Mhm.
all kinds, how to find your local resources. That's where you should really start. Find your local resources.
Mm.
One last thing also on that, talking about it's not too late. I would like to share a patient story. So
I
I
was
had
gonna
this,
ask.
yeah, I had this individual. So the oldest patient I've ever treated within our practice is 92 years old, which is the story that I'm about to tell. So again, like we talked about earlier, he was not a drug abuser. He had long-term pain, he had chronic pain, and his primary care physician, his doctor was prescribing, I believe, I think it was oxycodone, I'm pretty sure. It's been a couple years since this happened. Regardless, it doesn't matter. It was a pain medication. He was being prescribed from the oversight of his doctor, his primary care doctor, right? And just like we talked about earlier, that tolerance built, so his dose went up, and then the tolerance built, and his dose went up because you increase that dose. Man, hey doc, I feel great. My pain is managed, and then some time goes by. If it's 6 months or 2 years or however long it was, he had been taking this stuff for around, I can't remember, it was either 12 or 15 years, quite a while, well over a decade, right?
Yeah.
Finally, he was tapped, meaning doc says, "Man, I can't prescribe you anymore." Right? He knew it wasn't drug seeking behavior. He's not abusing the medication.
Right.
It's just the nature of opioids and chronic pain.
Right.
He needed more pain medication. Then the pain was met, and then the pain starts creeping back up. And then he needed more pain medication, and he went through this cycle over a decade or whatever. So his doctor's like, "Hey, I'm not going to prescribe you a higher dose. I can't prescribe you a higher dose. I'm at risk of getting in trouble myself. I don't want a radar on my back because if I get in trouble, now I can't treat all my other patients, right?
Right.
Go see Renew Health. I don't know. I don't know if they can help you or not, but go check them out." Well, in fact, we did help him.
Mm.
So we switched him over to Suboxone over the course of a couple of weeks. I have I like to call it proprietary, kind of my strategy that I use to do that. I don't know if anybody else that does it exactly like we do. Something that I coined, developed. Maybe somebody else is doing it. I don't know. I just don't know anybody that is. Anyways, over the course of a couple of weeks, transitioned him over. He did not experience any withdrawal at all. He never, his words, never had a moment of discomfort. Again, his words. So cool. We get him off of what he was doing. We put him on something that I can manage because I'm not going to prescribe oxy. That's directly against what I do.
Mhm.
Not that I think it's a bad medication. It's just not what I do.
Mhm.
So get him on Suboxone, get him stable, and we played with his dose a little bit to where his pain was managed. I can't tell you exactly why, but his pain was better managed using my medication than his, likely because it was something new. It had a different pathway that it worked, and so he
Mhm.
responded very, very well to it. Um, he went about 6 months like that and unfortunately passed away, completely unrelated to what we were doing. The man's 92 years old.
Mhm.
Okay, passed away
Right.
from other chronic conditions that he had. And right after he passed away, we'll say about a month later, his daughter, which I did not know, is also a doctor. She's a practicing medical doctor, made it a point to come to my office, which was not right down the street from her. She had to make a drive to say, "Hey, I just want to thank y'all for what you did because that 6 months of my father's life is the best he had felt in 10 years." And so his final 6 months of his life, he didn't have the pain. He wasn't having to go through withdrawal. So what he was doing is because his
Mhm.
doctor wouldn't go up on the dose, he's staring at the clock like, man, I'm starting to get uncomfortable. I need my pain pill, but I've got 2 more hours to go. So he physically would get uncomfortable. He would experience a little bit of withdrawal
Mhm.
until he could take his next pill. And this was his daily cycle throughout the day, throughout the night for years until
Mhm.
finally he came to see us. So he got his life back, so to speak. His quality of life improved for the last 6 months of his life before he passed away.
Wow. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yep.
And she made a drive to let
Yep.
y'all know. Do
Yep.
you have a website, right, Trent?
I do.
Mhm.
My personal website is thetrentcarter.com,
Mhm.
which there's no ego in that. It was just the only thing that was available. The person that
Right.
owns trentcarter.com won't respond to me. So I hope one day I can get that one. But it's thetrentcarter.com. And then, of course, we have renewhealth.com. So,
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, just in case, someone wants to, check out your websites and just more about what you do and more about Renew. as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. So look, guys, Renew Health, there is it's a treasure trove of information that's on there. So we post a daily blog. And when I say daily, oftentimes we even post twice a day. Just if you're struggling, if you know anybody that's struggling, or hey, you just want to learn a little bit more, I've kind of got this question I've been wondering about. I guarantee you we've probably touched on it or something very, very similar. So there's a lot of information on there. It's all credibly sourced, meaning it's not just opinion or something that's just thrown out there, right? It's something that's actually backed by fact rather than opinion. So I would encourage that. And yeah, what I do too. So I have a weekly blog that I post as well. If you want to keep up with me and what's going on, I talk about addiction and substance abuse, but I'm also an entrepreneur and business minded. I talk a lot about mindset and life change. So I'll talk about those things. Or, of course, socials, very active on socials as well. It's either the Trent Carter or it's Renew Health NM, as in New Mexico, Renew Health NM, if you want to follow Renew Health.
Nice, nice. Okay. So folks, two things actually. Well, three things. One, I'm gonna ask you after I finish the recording. Actually, both things I'm gonna ask you after I finish the recording. But the other thing is, okay, Trent, make sure that um, so what I'm gonna do is, folks, all the links that Trent said, I'm gonna put in the episode description below. Okay, so it's gonna be there in the episode description below. It'll already be hyperlinked. That way you can just tap and click,
It can go.
Yes, because if you're like me and type so fast that sometimes you misspell the easiest words, yeah, so it'll already be clicked and everything like that. Um, okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go on. I'll tell you after this. Um, okay, folks. So with that being said, I would like to thank Trent for coming on the show.
Thanks for
Thank you.
having me. Been a lot of fun. Great conversation. I
Great
hope that there was
conversation.
something in there that some of your listeners could find useful.
Yes. Yay. I hope I'm pretty sure. I am 1000% sure. Um okay, folks. So with that being said, y'all know I like to leave off with a little challenge. And usually I like to say tell one to two people that they're important or that they're loved, including yourself. But let's switch it up a bit. Folks, the challenge is tell yourself that you are enough. Even if you don't believe it, you don't have to believe it, folks. You don't have to believe it at first. It wouldn't be an affirmation if you believed it every time. So it's just like tell yourself, even if you don't believe it, even if you don't feel it, say it. You are enough. I'm going to say it. Josias, I am enough. I even have it as a ring on my finger that says I am enough. And it's even my phone background, folks, that says I'm enough. And so need to start believing that again. So folks, go ahead and that's my challenge today for you all. With that being said, this has been another episode of Vulnerability Time. Stay tuned for whatever that episode will be next. Get on out of here. Love you, folks.